Yo, what's going on, Titan Clan? It is your local narcissist here, KingTItanX here, back with another video. And let's get this video started. Alright, we are going to be doing What If Deku Was Soldier Boy. And I know what you guys are thinking, the rapper? Nah, we're talking about Soldier Boy from, not the comics, but the Amazon TV show. You know, the actual good version of Soldier Boy. Because in the comics, there's like 3 different iterations of Soldier Boy, and the latest edition of Soldier Boy in the comics is just this man peed his pants in like the comic book cover. I'm pretty sure nobody wants to hear that iteration of Soldier Boy. But yeah, let's get on to the video. 80% of this world's population have been born with this thing known as quirks, this phenomenon that seemed to have happened a good couple hundred years ago. With this new thing known as quirks, people have created a new profession, which is known as heroes. Heroes are essentially exactly what it sounds like. People who go around saving people using their superpowers. These are apparently like the main licensed people to use their quirks as well within the society. Sure, you can have some people who are police officers or something using their quirks as well, but for the most part, it was the heroes who had the limelight. They became celebrities of sorts. They often made a lot of money from marketing, from just being able to save people. They had a lot of merchandise as well. You could sell a lot of products with these super powered individuals. People that were seen as bigger than life, essentially, especially people like All Might within this world. Many people aspire to be just like these superheroes, but most of the time they just did not get the luck of the draw. Getting a quirk was basically like the lottery. Sometimes you can be born with a very strong quirk, other times you would just be born with a pretty average or mediocre quirk. Say you had someone that could control the elements. That would be considered a really strong quirk, especially if you could generate a whole lot of it. Now, you could have 2 individuals actually when it came on to controlling the elements. You could have a person who could create glaciers essentially with this ability to control ice. Another person, they could only create ice cubes. That was the extent of their quirk. Now you can definitely see which one would become a hero and which one would just become an office clerk. That was the whole issue with quirks. And then you also had 20% of the population. 20% of the population I actually want to focus on though, because they are the ones who are quirkless. They are seen as below most people. Most people see them as less than human sometimes. Well, it's like this. Quirked individuals, they are seen as regular people. 20% of the population are considered the minority, the people who were not blessed with quirks, and therefore they are seen as less capable overall. You would have to be extremely well in your profession. You would have to do miracles or whatever when you are a quirkless individual in order to, well, even be considered noteworthy within this world of quirks, or even just a typical person. You have to go above and beyond to prove your usefulness in this world. If you are born quirkless, your life is 10 times harder if you are quirkless. Especially if you are thinking about being a hero. The most you could ever be when trying to become a hero is a police officer. And even then, trying to become a police officer in the world of quirks when you are quirkless is incredibly risky as well. Most of the time the heroes will be the ones to handle the villains, or at least like take them down, and the police are the ones to arrest them. But sometimes these villains would just escape from captivity, and then the police officers, they would be the ones responsible for catching them again. And if you're quirkless, it's pretty understandable why that would be an issue. Especially, if you're dealing with somebody who has a gigantification quirk, an elemental control quirk, they're able to produce fire, they're able to control the wind, or they just have telekinesis or super strength. And you are quirkless. You literally only have the strength of a regular human. The most you can actually do is just go by the sidelines, try and create a trap or something. You can't use your own physical strength against these guys. Now, sure, in this world of quirks, you are considered to be a bit stronger than the humans a couple hundred years ago. You see within the show some humans, even though they may be quirkless at times, they're shown doing some unusual feats, you could say. For example, not even for example, you can look at people like Stain, who, although they do have quirks, you see that they don't have, physical quirks, something like super strength or super speed. No, their quirks don't rely on their power whatsoever, their physical strength or anything. They have to build up that strength over time, but yet they're able to do incredible feats. Now the issue is when you literally are just a regular human, you don't even have anything else. Sure, you can maybe use your weapons, but even then, what are you going to do against the guys who are able to just knock your head out? Some people who are like building level, people who are able to literally just punch down buildings, for crying out loud. How are you going to handle these sort of people when all you can do is lift a fridge? Lift like 200 pounds. Sure, you can be like peak human condition or whatever, but in the world of quirks, you need to have a lot more than just that in order to make it out there, in order to actually survive. If we want to be on that sort of field, if we want to be on the front lines. That's why most quirkless individuals are seen as less than, because they know that these quirkless individuals are more fragile than the ones with quirks, or at least the good quirks anyways. Those people that were born with just bad quirks, such as only being able to pull your eyes out to your eye sockets for a little bit, or able to stretch your fingers out a little bit. They're just considered to be a bit above quirkless individuals. They're not seen as much, really. But with all of these difficulties that quirkless individuals had, there would be this one quirkless man who throughout the years, he would have noticed how quirks continued to be evolving, and he wanted in on that action. Although he wasn't able to have a quirk himself, he decided to create a chemical. Throughout the years, this was actually in the beginning of the quirk era, you could say. This man, he decided to create something he would like to call Compound V. And over the years, he would have been experimenting on this chemical until eventually he was able to finally come up with the correct dosage, come up with the correct version in order to bestow upon people quirks. This Compound V, its whole process of being made would be passed on throughout the years. Even after the man's death, he would have made sure that chemicals spread. So those who were born in a minority, they would have been given a chance to also have quirks. That, and he also wanted to create his own super soldiers of sorts, but that didn't have to be known. He would have basically created his own sort of legacy. This man's name was known as Vought. Well, at least that would have just been his name that most people would have recognized. His last name, Vought, that's pretty much the only name that people would recognize throughout the years. And he would have even had a company named after him, which specialized in pharmaceuticals, especially with Compound V. They would have passed on this dosage throughout the years, and they would have also created a good amount of superheroes. But even with all of these superheroes, they still didn't stack up to some of the top 10 heroes, top 20, 30, 40, 50, top 50 heroes within Japan, the US, all of these different countries. They were trying to create something. They were trying to create something grand. And this is where Izuku would come in. You see, Izuku's father, Hisashi Midoriya, he actually worked for Vought in America. Hisashi needed to provide for his family, so he ended up going to America. He was living in America, and he was making an income in America by working for Vought. He was making a pretty good amount of money, actually, working for all of these superheroes, this large pharmaceutical company, and he was sending a good amount of money back to his family in Japan. But Vought would eventually find out that he had a son. His name was Izuku, and he was quirkless. Hisashi Midoriya, on the other hand, he actually did have a quirk. He had the ability to breathe fire, which wasn't all that remarkable, but it was at least something. And his wife, Inko Midoriya, she also had a quirk. Her quirk was basically, well, sort of telekinesis. A very, very weak version of telekinesis, only able to really pick up something similar to a toy or whatever. But when it came on to Vought, they would see an opportunity in Izuku. They would mention how, hey, you should definitely bring your son around here. The higher ups would actually bring Hisashi into their office one day, mentioning how they wanted to have a little experiment on Izuku. They understood that his son was quirkless, and they had also heard stories about him getting bullied. They were compassionate people. That was the whole reason why they were even making these superpowered individuals in the first place, in order to have it to where the quirkless people, they would also be given a fair chance at life. They were born dealt a bad hand, or like, well, it's like this. Quirkless people are basically dealt a bad hand in life from birth. That wasn't their fault. So with Vought's logic, why not have it to where these quirkless individuals could actually gain quirks of their own? Why not have it to where everybody has a fair chance at life? Why is it that 80% of the population is allowed to have quirks and 20% isn't? It didn't make much sense in their minds. So they were willing to offer up a free dosage to Hisashi Midoriya to give to his son Izuku Midoriya in Japan. In actuality, Vought was just using this as a marketing strategy. If they could make a hero in Japan, and they can market him incredibly well, then that would actually be very well for them. Especially if they could bring this kid to America. They needed to have some more foreign people within their group. they had this group known as Payback. They were an upcoming team, you could say, but the whole issue with Payback was that they weren't really all that diverse. It was mainly like a bunch of white people. Well, no, that's actually kind of racist. Well, basically it's like this. You had some Caucasians, you had maybe you had like some black people in there as well, and Mexican or two, or like some Spanish people, whatever. I'm not trying to offend anybody here. I'm just saying, like, their group was just made up of like the basic couple of people, but they wanted to expand. Essentially, they wanted to expand their group or groups, and they wanted to expand them to the point where it would include people of even Japanese origin. That's where Izuku would come in. They would have handed Hisashi a dosage, and they would mention how he should just go to Japan and deliver the dosage to his son directly. It would basically be a good gift, you could say. They would even have him on a paid vacation to Japan. Hisashi, hearing this, he would feel kind of honored. He honestly did feel like this was going to be a great opportunity for his son, so he would take the opportunity and deliver the dosage to his son. He would be sent to Japan, on a paid flight actually, to Japan, by, well, Vought. Vought would have actually paid for all of his expenses, and he would have came to his home in Japan where his family was. He would have knocked on the door, and Inko would have been surprised to see Hisashi home so soon. It was usually when it was something similar to Christmas in America, or like a holiday in America, that Hisashi would come by to see them. But that wasn't the case for today for some reason. But Hisashi would mention that he had an opportunity for Izuku to get a quirk. Inko would have been a bit skeptical. She would have been confused as to what Hisashi was trying to say. But Hisashi would explain that the company he works for, Vought, they specialize in pharmaceuticals. And within these pharmaceuticals, there's this thing known as Compound V. Compound V is something that essentially allows for individuals to, gain quirks. 80% of the population, they already have quirks. And Vought's reasoning is that it's not fair for only 80% of the population to have quirks. If there are people in this world who are born quirkless and they don't want to be quirkless, then by all means they shouldn't have to be treated as second-class citizens. If they really want to be treated as the same as everybody else, then they would need to have a quirk for some reason. Although it was poor logic it was pretty poor logic in Vought's mind that people without quirks are treated like second-class citizens. They can't really change that, but what they could change is their status. That's where Compound V would come in. They would sell Compound V or like deliver Compound V to quirkless individuals so that they could gain quirks of their own, and for once they could finally fit in. Now, Compound V was usually delivered to infants. It was usually seen as, well, safer for infants to have Compound V injected into their bloodstream. But when it came on to at least teenagers, they could work as well. It was mainly when it came on to adults that it became an issue because of like their advanced physiology. They wouldn't have as much time to adapt, you could say. So by the time Izuku was 14, His father would inject this strange chemical into his back, his lower back. It was painful at first, but Hisashi would mention that this would be for his own good. This would be for Izuku's own good. He would actually thank him in the future for doing this to him as well. Izuku was hesitant to believe this at first, but he trusted his dad. His dad did know best. So Izuku would go through with the injection, despite how painful it was, all the way through. His dad would just console him the whole time, until the process was through with, and Izuku's eyes, they would glow for a bit. He started to feel not really all that different actually. He felt pretty normal at first, but it was only after a week that things started to change for Izuku. You see, Bakugo, he would have been on his bullying campaign once again. Bakugo always bullied Izuku for the fact that he was quirkless, and Izuku, he couldn't really do much against it. He despised that fact. He despised the fact that he was quirkless, and he could never do anything to stop Bakugo. Even when he tried when he was little, he only ever got beat up even worse than before. Izuku had to learn his place essentially, but after a week of torment when he got that compound V injected into him, Izuku, he started to feel a bit more confident for some weird reason. For some reason today, he felt as if he could take on the world. He felt as if Bakugo wasn't going to bully him any longer. He was going to put an end to this right here and right now. He would stand up to Bakugo for once today, after all these years of just taking this torment, taking all of this bullying. And Bakugo, he would just laugh at Izuku, thinking that this kid was stupid. But Izuku, he would sucker punch Bakugo, and this punch, Bakugo would actually feel it. Bakugo's jaw just dislodged for a second, and he would be in shock and pain. He would have actually been sent to the hospital, and Izuku would have been suspended for a couple weeks actually. Izuku wouldn't even be all that upset though. He wouldn't be upset over the fact that they allow Bakugo to just get away scot-free for all of this bullying he did, but yet the one time that Izuku actually defended himself, that's the time he gets in trouble. No, he wasn't mad at all. Nah, he was more excited than anything. You see, he just awakened his quirk. He had super strength. It seemed that chemical that his father injected into him that week ago actually seemed to work. It seemed to have finally kicked in all of a sudden. Izuku was feeling stronger. He felt more capable of himself. He was feeling more confident. He was excited. He was ecstatic actually. He felt as if he could take on the world now. He realized that he could become a superhero. Just like All Might. He could be just like All Might. And that's what really got to him. When Izuku came back to school after those couple weeks of being suspended, many people would be looking at Izuku differently. Many people would even have rumors. They would be whispering to each other, talking about how Izuku just clocked Bakugo in the jaw just a couple weeks ago, and that left him in the ER. That left Bakugo in the ER. It made no sense to a lot of them. They thought that Izuku was quirkless. But now all of a sudden Izuku was coming in with super strength, enough to take Bakugo, the strongest kid in their class, the strongest kid in their school actually. He took him down. That was amazing in many of their eyes. That was, it was unbelievable actually. Bakugo, he would have also been back at school at this point, and he would have been glaring daggers at Izuku. He believed that Izuku had been lying about about not having a quirk for so many years, just so that he could embarrass him that one time. He let Izuku. No, what am I saying? He was under the belief that Izuku was lying about being quirkless for so many years, just so that he could embarrass Bakugo later on, far in the future, for whatever reason. Bakugo, he hated Izuku for that. He wanted to get his revenge on Izuku, especially for what he did to his jaw. He was still struggling right now when it came on to eating. He had to still drink from a straw. He still had to drink from a straw for like these next couple of weeks. He had to wait until like 4 months in order to be allowed to, well, I don't know, well, eat properly again because of what Izuku did to him. Mitsuki, she wanted to press charges, but at the same time, Inko would have had Izuku make an apology. Although Izuku would also mention the fact that Bakugo had been bullying him for the longest now. That was the whole reason he even got into a fight with Bakugo in the first place. Mitsuki wouldn't believe it at first, but the way Izuku described it, it sounded so in character for his son. And Katsuki, he would have just been aghast. He would have looked over to his mother, and she would have actually been furious at Bakugo now. They would be looking at each other, and Mitsuki would apologize for what happened to Izuku throughout these years, for him to end up in such a way, for him to act so violently towards her son. Granted, what Bakugo did as well was irredeemable. As a matter of fact, she needed to punish Bakugo as well. Well, what Izuku did was practically punishment already. This may be what's going to humble Bakugo for the forthcoming future, you could say. Or at least that was Mitsuki's hopes during that time. But in the present time that we're focusing on right now, Izuku just wouldn't have felt very different from how he was before. Like I said before, he was more confident. He was all of a sudden very popular for some reason. Many people were basically looking up to Izuku at this point. They were basically seeing Izuku as an underdog, the guy who finally awakened this quirk and taught Bakugo a lesson. Izuku liked this attention. He liked it a lot. He could actually get used to it. And the teacher would one day even mention the fact that both Izuku and Bakugo, they were trying to get into UA. Many people, when they heard this, they didn't really say anything. Well, they did say that they had high hopes in Izuku when it came on to him making it into UA. When Bakugo screamed at the fact that he was also going to be making it into UA, or as a matter of fact, he was going to be the only one that was going to make it into UA. Many people, they would be like, yeah, Bakugo does seem like a very likely candidate to make it into UA. But Izuku, oh, he for sure is probably going to make it into UA. Bakugo, he has the flashiness aspect. He has the flashiness of his quirk being explosions. He has more versatility, you could say, but in terms of just pure raw strength, Izuku just had that. That was the main thing Izuku had over Bakugo. Pure raw strength and speed. That was the main thing Izuku had. And he was even training at times as well. Always upping his strength and speed, trying to always make sure that he was ahead of everybody, considering how big of a disadvantage he had over everybody else. He needed to catch up with everybody. He only had his quirk for just a couple months at this point. He needed to train even harder than before, if he wanted to make it into UA. If he wanted to become a hero, then well, just having a strong quirk wasn't going to be it. He needed to train this quirk. He needed to master this quirk. He needed to master his strength and speed if he was going to ever be anything sort of similar to All Might. He wanted to have that sort of fame for himself. He was getting all of this attention from his classmates and his middle school, but he wanted even more attention now. He understood where Bakugo was coming from. He admired the attention. The attention was addicting, but he was also becoming a bit of a jerk, you could say, when it came onto this attention. He was a glory hog. He wanted all his attention for himself, and he would basically even have some backlash towards some people who tried to even remotely try and upstage him. Anybody that tried to show that they were also capable, Izuku would easily humble them back down with violence, you could say. Izuku was getting more abusive in terms of his relationships with the students at the school, more abusive than Bakugo ever was. Many people would actually become fearful of Izuku for that fact. Many people who knew Izuku personally, they honestly didn't have the best sort of relationship. They didn't really like Izuku, but they tolerated him because of the fact that they knew they couldn't do anything against him. What were they going to do against a kid that could literally just break your jaw in one punch? What were they going to do? What? Chew him out? And then what? And get their brains splattered all across the floor? Yeah, no, they knew better. They knew better than to actually risk trying to talk to Izuku about his attitude. Even the teachers knew better. They tried to suspend him on multiple occasions, but that didn't seem to do anything. It only seemed to bolster Izuku's confidence even more each and every time. It's because of the fact that these people, they tried to detain him, tried to control him. And that's the main issue. Every time they tried to control him, it would always end up backfiring on them because Izuku would come back 10 times worse. He refused to basically be controlled. He wanted to become a celebrity, and that's exactly what he was going to get. First, he was going to make it into UA. Then he was going to train extra hard in order to make sure that nobody surpassed him. Anybody that did try, he would show them where their real place was on the pecking order. And then he will go on to become the #1 hero of Japan, or maybe even the world, become a worldwide celebrity or something. When he actually looked at his powers as well and compared them to All Might, they seem to be rather similar. It's just that he needed to become even stronger. For the next 10 months, that's exactly what Izuku would have been doing. He would have been training his butt off in order to increase his super strength and speed. He also wanted to increase his durability. Well, there wasn't really much he could do about that, to be honest, considering he was already bulletproof, which is something above most people within this world. Most people already seem to have like some form of super strength in comparison to people from before quirks, but Izuku's super strength was to the point where he could easily lift 600 pounds with one arm. Casually, I should say. He could literally just walk around with 600 pounds on one arm at every moment of the day, and he would feel no fatigue from it whatsoever. He wanted to increase that to 1200. Although he would only be able to increase it to about 900 to like 1000 by the end of the 10 months, which, although incredible, it's still not what he found to be necessary. He wanted to keep rising up in terms of numbers every single moment. He wanted to always keep improving so that he would never be left behind. He never wanted to be that quirkless, weak Deku again. He despised that version of himself with all of his person. He despised that person with all of his heart. He never wanted to go back there because he felt so weak, so alone. But now he felt popular. He was actually popular for once in his life. And he wasn't about to just let that go so easily. He wasn't about to let go of this opportunity that his father and bot got for him. Or, well, gave to him. He wasn't about to just waste it whatsoever. That's exactly why he trained so hard during those 10 months. So that he would make sure he was a shoe-in for UA. Sure, he was already confident in his abilities, but he didn't know what sort of competition he had to deal with. Especially when it came on to people who had their quirks for like 10 plus years. Well, Izuku, although he was no slouch, he only had his quirk for about a year at this point. When the UA entrance exams finally rolled around, Izuku would have felt as if he was ready. He was actually extremely confident in his abilities at this point, and he would have just been sitting rather smug throughout the whole time while listening to President Mike talk about what they had to deal with. Izuku would be interested, finding out that they had to fight robots for the practical part of the exam, and Izuku, he was already capable of punching through steel, so that wasn't really much of an issue for him. So this was what Izuku would end up doing throughout most of that battle. As soon as the gates opened up, Izuku would have rushed in before everybody else. Many people would call out Izuku, for rushing in before President Mike even called time, but President Mike would actually agree with Izuku's philosophy. Nobody was going to tell you when a fight was about to emerge or commence. So, as soon as you see the gates open up, you should immediately go rushing in. There is no countdown in a real battle, so they should follow Izuku. Many of the kids, they would immediately rush in, hoping to get some points as well. But Izuku, he already would have taken down a couple of pointers. He would have taken down a 1-pointer, and he would have also taken out like 3 2-pointers. That would have been like 6 points in total for like those 2-pointers. And he would have also taken down 1 3-pointer. He would have also been using one of the like metal plates from one of the robots in order to use as a shield for whenever he was fighting them. He would be fighting each and every last one of the robots. He would have been taking them down like they were child's play. He would have been seen massacring these robots by leaping onto them, ripping out their circuits, throwing them to the floor, and he would actually grab a couple by the feet and just throw them into each other. Many kids would be amazed at Izuku's strength, and they would have been wondering what sort of capabilities, or like what sort of quirk Izuku had. Many people would assume super strength, which they wouldn't be all that far off with, but that wouldn't be all that he really had. Izuku would have also been seen not just rushing into some of the robots. Many kids would be surprised. At first they thought he had super strength, but then seeing him literally just charge into some of the robots, just rush through some of the robots, and not even have any sort of scar on him, no sort of injury whatsoever, they would have been questioning if he also had some sort of hardening quirk or whatever. Did his skin just seem to be all that durable, or what? They were confused. What sort of quirk did this madman have? Izuku was just running in wild, and through the cameras, like the evaluation room, many teachers would be looking at Izuku, and they would have seen him as an interesting prospect for a student this year. They would have also been looking at Bakugo and his performance during the entrance exam, and they would have realized that both Bakugo and Izuku were madmen, essentially. And they would have also found out that these two came from the same school. They were They were wondering what kind of school this was. What kind of school could raise such freaks of nature? By the end, Izuku and Bakugo, they would have had similar scores. But what's also interesting is the fact that neither one of them ended up getting any hero points. Well, not hero points, but like rescue points. Izuku would have gotten some rescue points if he decided to save that one girl from the 0-pointer, but he decided against it. He realized that he was already a bit too drained, and he was a bit too drained from, well, fighting all of these robots for 10 minutes straight. He needed to work on that. He needed to work on, well, all of these different issues. He would just constantly find flaws within himself and try to work on them so that he would be above the rest no matter what. So we needed to work on his endurance. Since his endurance could only seem to last for so long, he'd never actually been in real combat like that after all. The 0-pointer robot would have been called off before they got too close from Ochako though, so it was alright. And by the end of the entrance exam, Izuku, well, obviously Izuku would have passed, just without any rescue points. Izuku would have had around 81 points while Bakugo had 77 points. The only reason that Izuku had a slightly higher score than Bakugo was because of the fact that he had such an incredible amount of super strength. Bakugo, he just had a lot more range with his quirk. That was the reason why they had such similar scores. Izuku had incredible super strength but not a whole lot of range. Bakugo didn't have as powerful of an ability as Izuku, but he had more range than Izuku. So that was why the scores were so close. But Izuku just rushing into some of these robots, crashing into them, just busting out the side and all that. That was what was the main reason why Izuku was able to stay ahead. Izuku felt as if he had already managed to win his spot into UA, and he would be absolutely correct in this belief because like a couple weeks later he would actually get a letter in the mail, and it would basically be a hologram of Nezu welcoming Izuku into UA. Izuku would be pleased to hear this, and he would also end up meeting a bunch of new people when he finally arrived at UA. He would have been in his UA uniform and everything, and he would meet a couple of people, but he wasn't really all that concerned with them. He just saw them as classmates and stepping stones as well. People that could potentially get in his way of becoming number one if he were to just slip up. He knew that he was dealing with the best of the best in terms of how strong their quirks were, or at least that's what he suspected. Some of them he wasn't all that sure about, but he understood that when it came on to that, well, quirk evaluation thing that was happening with UA during the entrance exams, it had to mean that these kids had to be proficient enough with their quirks in order to make it into UA, or else why would they even be here? A top-notch hero high school like UA, you had to be some of the very best, top 1% or something. And that's why Izuku prided himself so much on making it into UA. It was like a monument or something. That's basically the way Izuku saw it, although some treated it even more importantly than others, considering how as soon as he walked into the class, he saw this blue-haired boy with glasses reprimanding Bakugo for putting his feet on the table. Izuku would actually look at Bakugo and glare before actually walking over to Ida and Bakugo as well. He would also reprimand Bakugo for putting his feet on the table and actually slap him right across the face. Bakugo would have been angered by this and tell Izuku what's his problem. He would be roaring in fury, but Izuku, he would just slap Bakugo again, mentioning how, oh, cheer up, don't be such a sorry powder, whatever. All this kid is asking for you to do is to just put your feet down. After all, you were at high school such as UA. This is a very prestigious high school. Treat the place with some respect. That's essentially what Izuku would have been saying to Bakugo. And Bakugo, knowing that he couldn't really do much of anything, he would actually sit down properly this time. Aizawa wouldn't have heard all of this commotion, and he would have actually gotten up as well from his sleeping bag. He would introduce himself as Shota Aizawa, and this class has been loud for far too long. It took them like 8 seconds to actually quiet down, for crying out loud. That wasn't going to work in the hero world. Izuku liked Aizawa's attitude. He was a no-nonsense sort of dude. He could get behind that. Aizawa was so no-nonsense, as a matter of fact, that he wouldn't even have his kids go to like the annual ceremony for the newest members of UA or anything. Rather Aizawa would actually have the kids do a quick evaluation test and go outside to the PE area and dress up in like their PE uniforms as well. Chaco would have mentioned how they should also have been going to the annual ceremony, but Aizawa would have mentioned that there is no time for that. This school prides itself on the fact that teachers are allowed to teach the way they want, and therefore, if Aizawa wants to skip out on the ceremony, then he has all right to do so, because there are far more important things to deal with than some stupid ceremony. What these kids need to deal with is actually getting a feel for their quirks. Because of the fact that their schools, they were usually trying to suppress the usage of your quirk, try and make it feel as if everybody is equal. But that is just not the case at all. Nobody is equal in this world. Nobody is given nobody is dealt the same hand in life, essentially. Izuku would have heard every word that Aizawa was saying, and he would be agreeing with it. He absolutely agreed with Aizawa's methodology because of the fact that he had to go through that as well. He had to go through all of this throughout life. He understood what it was like to be powerful and to be weak. He had basically been living on both sides of the equation, so he knew exactly what it felt like. He understood what Aizawa was saying, and when they went to do the quirk evaluation test, Izuku would have actually been the first one up, because of the fact that Izuku managed to get the highest score on the entrance exam, which Bakugo would have been angry about, but he remembered the slap he just got like an hour ago from Izuku, and he would just bite his tongue in furiosity, knowing that he couldn't really do much against Izuku right now. He would just save it for another day. He would just need to get stronger is all. But Izuku, he would essentially throw the ball into the atmosphere, and he would have basically thrown it out of orbit. Or at least, yeah, he would have just thrown it out of orbit. Many people would be impressed by Izuku's score, wondering just how strong Izuku really was. And Aizawa would actually mention how he was actually going to not suspend, but actually expel one of these kids, kick them out of class 1A, kick them out of the hero course if they can't perform good enough. If somebody makes it to last place, whoever makes it into last place, they were going to get expelled from UA, essentially. That's basically what Azawa was going to tell these kids in order to make sure that they did their very hardest. That they did their very best, because of the fact that he heard one of the kids saying, "Oh, we get to use our quirks in this? Oh, this seems so fun." He heard all of that excitement, and he realized that if he didn't tell them this, then nothing was really going to get done. He needed to threaten them with expulsion if he wanted to see their very best results, see their true potential. And this Izuku kid was already seeming to be part of the cream of the crop, you could say. Throughout most of the competitions, Izuku would have just dominated each and every last one of them. Well, besides a couple. You see something like the speed, the 50-meter dash, I should say. You see, Ida would have dominated that one. Izuku would have been like top 3 though. Izuku would have been in the top 3 in terms of speed, but he wasn't able to make it into first place for that one. Most of the others Izuku was able to dominate in though. And by the end, Izuku, he would have ended up even getting up to first place, which impressed many of the kids. This would actually also infuriate Bakugo even more. And then there was this kid who got 20th place. His name was Manetta, and his quirk seemed to just be sticky balls or whatever. Basically, he was able to dislodge these purple balls from his head, which apparently were very sticky for everybody else if they were to touch it. But the way he used his quirk, honestly, like, Izuku really did not care for this kid whatsoever. He didn't feel bad for this kid. In all honesty, Izuku didn't even think that Manetta deserved to be part of UA with how pathetic his quirk really was. Even when looking at this girl, Invisible Girl, Toru Hagakure, he was wondering what was so special about her. Like, sure, she was invisible, but it didn't even seem like she could turn that off, which was weird. There was also this tail guy. Literally, his whole quirk was that he just had a tail. Izuku was confused as to why some of these guys managed to make it into UA when he had to work his butt off in order to make it into UA. It seemed as if UA was just accepting anybody and everybody now. It actually kind of upset Izuku a little bit with how some of these kids had such pathetic looking quirks. At least with some of the kids though, they had interesting enough quirks. One kid was able to harden his skin. She was able to create acid. Another girl, actually, she was literally able to create items from her body fat. Izuku found that these quirks were worthy of UA. Yeah, these were the sort of quirks that were worthy of being in UA. Not these secondhand quirks, not these secondhand quirk users. Literally sticky balls, being able to be invisible the whole time, and then there's just this one guy with a tail. Nah, in Izuku's opinion, all 3 of these guys should have been expelled from UA. These guys should have never made it into UA in the first place. That was the way Izuku was looking at it. And then there was this one kid, Oyama. He seemed to just have this one laser quirk, this naval laser quirk, where he was able to use it, but only for 1 second at a time. If he was able to use it for longer, then okay, maybe he could be part of UA. That seemed to be a kind of cool enough quirk, but 1 second? Really? And then you have a tummy ache? That's it? How are you going to help on the front lines? Nah, Izuku refused to believe that some of these kids were even able to make it into UA. It made no sense to Izuku. It seemed as if they didn't try hard enough, or that they were just born with the bad hands, but yet they were somehow seen better than Izuku was at first. It didn't make much sense. And like, for you to have quirks like this, and then to say a quirkless person couldn't make it into UA, was basically an insult to Izuku at this point. To make matters worse, Aizawa allowed this kid, Mineta, to stay in Class 1A because he showed some potential or whatever? No! No, he didn't! That's at least what Izuku was seeing. This kid showed nothing remarkable whatsoever. He was literally staring at girls most of the time. This guy was literally just letting his hormones run wild most of the time when he should have actually been training, or like actually taking this quirk evaluation test seriously. So this was basically an insult to injury, or adding salt to injury or whatever. And Izuku's book, that's the way Izuku was seeing it. He hated this. At first he thought he could understand Aizawa, but no. Now Aizawa was completely losing him. But he also heard that All Might was going to be a teacher at UA the very next day. This would interest Izuku, although he would also be finding out how the UA curriculum seemed to work as well. He was surprised to see how many heroes were actually teachers at UA, and he realized he could make a lot of connections here at UA. He admired this, and when he found out that All Might was going to be that teacher, this excited Izuku. He was finally going to meet the man and see just how much room he still had to grow if he ever wanted to surpass All Might. Izuku would have ended up finding out from All Might, who was apparently his teacher now, that they were going to be doing hero combat. They were going to be practicing combat? Interesting. Izuku did have to actually work on his endurance a little bit, so this was actually going to be interesting for Izuku. This was actually going to excite Izuku a little bit, because this is something that he was trying to work on for the longest now. But although he was able to increase his speed and his strength, he wasn't really able to increase his endurance that much, besides like just carrying a bunch of weight on himself. But when it came on to like how he moved, and like fighting and running were very different. Fighting and running, they were very different things essentially. So Izuku was excited to deal with that. They would end up getting some hero uniforms as well. They would have actually had it to where, well, I don't know how to describe it. Basically, what ended up happening is that when it came on to hero costumes as well, the kids will be allowed to wear their hero costumes this time around, which Izuku had already made a sketch for and sent the design over to like UA's support department a while back. So this was going to be the first time that Izuku was going to be wearing his hero uniform, and he was excited for that. And yeah, I'm going to be completely honest, his hero outfit is basically Soldier Boys from the boys. I'm not even going to put any effort into it, even when it came down to the shield. Except when it came onto the shield, it wouldn't be like an American eagle or like a bald eagle. Instead, it would have the Japanese flag on it, or the Japanese animal, Japan's national animal, or whatever you want to call it. That's the sort of thing that would be on the shield. Izuku would also find out that they were going to be doing heroes versus villains that day, and Izuku would be rather pumped. He was excited, and he would find out that he was going to be on the hero side with this kid, Mineta. He was on a team with Mineta Minora. He was already annoyed. He was already annoyed that this kid was still here at UA. And then he found out that he also had to deal with this kid being on his team. Yeah, nah, this kid totally wasn't going to hold him back, right? Yeah, nah. Yeah, Izuku already could predict that this kid was going to hold him back throughout this whole fight. So he would literally just tell Mineta to just sit down, sit tight, and Izuku would handle everything. Mineta, he would have been like, okay. He would have been actually pretty down for that. And the fact that he didn't even make any sort of argument against it already said enough about Mineta in Izuku's eyes. He basically saw Mineta as worthless. He was born with a quirk, and he could potentially make that quirk strong, but he didn't put any effort into it whatsoever. Like, the more Izuku learned about Mineta, the more he despised him. And then Izuku also had to deal with his incompetent foes for this battle. His incompetent foes were basically like the tail guy and like this frog girl. Alright, at least with the frog girl, he could see some potential in her. Like, she had a frog mutation quirk. Alright, he could get behind that. It wasn't like the best quirk out there, but at least there was some usage with that quirk. Like, she could stick to walls or whatever. Well, like, she was no spider girl or anything, but like, at least there was some practical use to that quirk. That was something that Izuku could apply her for. But the tail guy, he literally saw nothing in it whatsoever. So as soon as Izuku went up to deal with the villains, he would easily dispose of Ojiro. Or Ojiro. He would just easily dispose of Ojiro. Oh, I keep on saying Ojiro. You know, screw his name. Of tail guy. And when it came on to Tsuyu, he would literally just bash her with his shield. He would literally just throw his shield at her, and literally just keep it on her the whole time until he went to go and touch the bomb, which that's really how easy it was for him to deal with those villains. It would have been a really lackluster fight, in all honesty. He wished he could have fought Bakugo or someone instead, but hey, at least he won that fight. He wouldn't have seen Tsuyu struggling to lift that shield off of her, and Izuku would just walk over and grab it, lifting it off of her right after. She would have been breathing heavily. She would have looked at Izuku in fear at just how strong he was to be carrying that hunk of metal around like it was nothing. Just how strong was this kid? But Izuku, he would just have a fake smile on his face the whole time. He would try and keep up public perception that he was a really good guy or whatever, and that, yeah, he would try and just keep up perception. He knew that he was lying through his teeth. He knew that he was basically putting up a fake front. He was just putting up a front the whole time in order to make it look like he was a genuinely good guy. But in all honesty, he honestly just wanted to crush each and every last one of his classmates in a battle, just to prove that he was the strongest. And then when you saw this kid with candy cane hair, like half of his hair was red and the other half was white, he just came in and walked through the building like he was a boss, and then he just No, he didn't even walk through the building. He just told his teammate Shoji to stay back, and he just froze the entire building like it was nothing that time around. Izuku would have been in awe, just seeing how powerful this kid Todoroki was, and to find out that he was the son of the #2 hero of Japan. He already knew that was his rival. He needed to take down Todoroki. He needed to show Todoroki that he was the stronger of the two. The fact that Todoroki could accomplish something so amazing with minimal effort was impressive to Izuku. He wouldn't even lie. But he needed to make sure that this kid didn't steal all of the spotlight away from him. Bakugo's fight would have also been really lackluster due to him not really having that strong of an opponent to deal with. He would have just pretty much clobbered all of his opponents, and Izuku would have seen the disappointed look on Bakugo's face as well. He would kind of smirk because Bakugo had that same feeling, that same desire to fight somebody strong and show that he was superior in that way. Izuku could understand where Bakugo was coming from. He wanted to prove that he was the strongest after all, but he could not do that. He could not do such a thing if he was going to be dealing with these plebeians, these weaklings. The next day, Aizawa would have actually came into class, and he would have mentioned how he actually took a look at the kids fighting, or like the combat skills just yesterday, and he would actually applaud Izuku on the fact that he was able to deal with his opponents as fast as he did, although he did reprimand the boy a little bit on the fact that he didn't let Mineta help him whatsoever. He mentioned that they were supposed to be a team in that fight, and the fact that they were supposed to be a team meant that they should have also found a way to at least cover each other. Izuku, it would have been fine if Mineta was right beside him, making sure to cover his back in case one of the villains managed to try and do a sneak attack on Izuku, but no, Izuku didn't even bother to do that. He just saw that he didn't really need anybody's help, and that was going to get Izuku killed one day. As for Bakugo, he was just too much of a hothead. And that was pretty much it. That's pretty much all Aizawa really had to say for those two. He would talk about the others' performances, but he would also bring up the issue of, finding somebody to be their class president. And many people, they would immediately try and elect themselves. Many people would try and mention how, they should be president, I should be president, they should be president, he should be president, she should be president, all that sort, but Ida would have been the one to actually put structure into all of it. He would have mentioned how they should do a vote for who should be the class president. And the fact that people didn't really know each other all that well right now meant that it would be less biased. Everybody would have understood where Ida was coming from, and it actually did indeed sound far more structured. Honestly, when it came on to Aizawa, he didn't care how they did as long as they got it done by the end of class. So Aizawa would wake up to find that, all of the kids, they voted for a good amount of people, but the one who got the most votes was actually Izuku, for his charismatic personality, although that was more for front than anything. Many people didn't really know it, but Izuku was a really big Drake at this point in life. And, and the whole thing is, he was also really strong, like really, really strong. Ridiculously strong, as a matter of fact. The only reason why they didn't select Todoroki was because of the fact that he just seemed to be too cold towards the rest of the students, and they didn't want to deal with a class president like that. As for Momo, she would have actually ended up being the vice president of the class. And many of the kids, they would have actually been fine with this result. Izuku would have especially been very fine with this result. He would have actually been very happy that he got class president. As for lunch, basically, Izuku would have just been talking to, some of his classmates, mentioning how he has a really strict training regimen in order to make sure that he doesn't fall far behind. A lot of them would have been writing this down, but Izuku would have just been laughing internally, knowing that his training regimen, it's not at all what he was telling them. He was literally just going to burn these guys out if they were actually going to try this training regimen. Sure, he could probably do this, but that's only because of his unique physiology at this point. As for the others, he wasn't all that sure. He wasn't all that uplifting of a person, although he did try and fake a charismatic personality for the camera. And for the students for right now anyways. But eventually Izuku would have had enough. He would just tell the kids how he wanted to eat his lunch because, a body like this needs a lot of calories. Obviously they would have backed off, but right when Izuku was about to eat his meal, all of a sudden an alert would go off mentioning how a Class 3 threat managed to break into UA. Somebody managed to intrude. Look. Basically, an alert would have gone off that there were intruders on campus. Many of the kids would be fearful, mainly higher ups, second and third years. They would immediately go rushing out to the building, wondering what was going on. They were trying to rush out to the building. They were trying to leave the cafeteria, and they would have ran out in a large pile of students, basically it would have been like a large crowd. A large crowd of students would have been rushing out of the building, or at least the cafeteria, and they were trying to leave the building as well, thinking that villains managed to make their way onto campus, but that wasn't necessarily the case. Izuku would have looked through the windows at one point, and he would have realized that no, it was actually just paparazzi, news reporters, and he would have used a commanding voice in order to tell the kids that, hey, you guys are acting ridiculous. You know that, right? You do understand that, we literally are hero students. We are literally being trained to deal with these sort of situations, and you guys are running around like headless chickens or whatever, chickens with no head. And for crying out loud, bro, you literally did not even look out the window. If you actually looked out the window and actually evaluated what was really going on, you would have understood that it wasn't actually villains that were out there. It was just a bunch of news reporters that managed to break into UA. They were trying to get an interview with All Might. That's literally it. Many of the students would actually relax hearing that, and they would they would walk peacefully back to their classes. Izuku would have been praised by his fellow classmates for what he did back there, because a lot of his classmates are actually getting trampled on at one point or another because of this huge crowd of people, this huge sea of individuals running away like some scaredy cats or whatever. Izuku have just soaked up all of the praise. He adored all of it. He adored being seen as strong and seen as a sort of leader, essentially. So when it came time for the USJ, many people would have been admiring Izuku at this point. They would talk about his quirk, or what they assumed was a quirk, and mention how Izuku, although his quirk was kind of weird, well, not weird, it's more so like this. Izuku's quirk reminded them of All Might, essentially. And Izuku would actually mention how he definitely admired All Might. He admired All Might by a lot. The only issue is that he's just not as strong as All Might yet. His goal was to become as strong as All Might and to become the #1 hero. Many people looked on in awe hearing that. They could definitely see it in Izuku. He had that same charismatic smile. Everything about Izuku just screamed charismatic, and he seemed to be like a clone of All Might, for crying out loud. Or like, not necessarily a clone, but more like somebody that was going to be All Might's successor. Izuku definitely had what it took to become All Might's successor, in terms of becoming the new #1 hero or whatever. But when it came on to people like Bakugo and Todoroki, although they had flashy quirks, their personalities weren't all there, you could say. That was pretty much going to be the main thing holding those two back, or at least that's what Tsuyu's conclusion was. The kids were gotten off of the bus, and they would end up going to the USJ to meet up with 13, who would mention how destructive their quirks could be, how dangerous their quirks could be if they were used in the wrong hands, which was why they were going to be doing rescue training today, so that they could learn how to handle their quirks more properly in these sort of situations, where strength did not necessarily matter, but the ability to use them to save people was what really mattered. But they wouldn't even be able to complete that because of the fact that a strange portal would appear. Kirishima would have mentioned how UA seemed to really have it all. They even had fake villains coming to the USJ, for crying out loud, but Aizawa would be confused until he turned around and saw this strange portal with these strange people coming out of it, and then he would have realized these aren't fake villains. No. He would have told everybody to get behind him right now, because these were real villains. These were not fake villains whatsoever. Many of the kids, they would start panicking all of a sudden hearing that. They couldn't believe that actual villains had managed to make it into the USJ. 13 would have tried to also help handle these villains, but they would have ended up literally just getting their back blown out by Kirigiri, because of the fact that they were able to just use the word gate in order to use 13's black hole quirk against her. Many of the kids would actually be horrified seeing this, and they didn't really know what to do in this situation besides try and defend themselves. A lot of the kids would actually be teleported to different areas. Izuku would be one of the few that did not get teleported though. This was because of the way that Izuku moved. Izuku was just very fast as an individual and very strong as well. He was able to actually find Kirigiri's main body and hit it before he could actually get teleported. He would have thrown the shield at Kirigiri's main body, and this would severely injure Kirigiri because of the fact that he wasn't used to getting hit by such a strong attack from something so heavy. And Izuku would go on to and get down from the stairs, or not even the stairs, just the area. He would have just went to accompany Aizawa in his fight against the villains, and he would have taken down a good couple of villains. Aizawa would have been upset at the fact that Izuku wasn't listening to him. He was upset with the fact that Izuku should have been with 13, but for some reason the kid decided to come down here and help try and take on some villains that were beyond his pay grade. he was still a student after all, and Aizawa was a licensed hero. Aizawa should have been the only one helping in this situation. He didn't want Izuku to get hurt after all. But Izuku would have mentioned how he had this all handled, and he would continue to show that he was still rather capable. Sure, he was a student, but he was incredibly strong, an incredibly strong student. Aizawa just had an erasure quirk. He can only erase people's quirks, but what about the people with mutation quirks? Aizawa would have mentioned how he wasn't just a one-trick pony, and he would have shown his own combat skills, which would actually impress Izuku. He needed to learn a thing or two from Aizawa when it came on to hand-to-hand combat, because he actually looked at even All Might's way of fighting, and he realized that it wasn't all that. He was literally just using his strength for the most part. He actually had extremely wide attacks, but the only reason why All Might was able to get away with it was because of just how strong and powerful he was, and how fast he was as well. So even if he had very wide attacks, it wouldn't really matter in the long run, because nobody could actually counter in enough time. As for Izuku, although he was fast and very strong, he was not All Might's level of strong just yet. That's something he was working on. Izuku would pretty much end up just taking down most of the villains until he ended up having to deal with the Nomu. And Izuku actually struggled with the Nomu, the main reason for this being because this creature was built to take beatings from All Might. Izuku was able to sustain some damage on the Nomu, but the Nomu was able to injure Izuku as well. It would have been a long, heated battle, and Izuku would have ended up just stalling for the most part until Ida managed to get away and, well, end up recruiting some more heroes. He would have ended up actually getting backup for Izuku, essentially. And All Might would eventually arrive as well. Izuku would have worn down the Nomu at least a little bit, and All Might would have handled the Nomu from there. He would have also took care of the rest of the villains within the facility. And the unfortunate part of it all would be when discovering that two of his classmates, they didn't make it. Suyu and Mineta, they were, well, killed by the villains. This would have been a very humbling moment for Izuku. He wasn't used to death. He would have realized right then and there how fragile life could be, even if you have a quirk. He never thought about it that way before. Now Izuku had to change his mentality about quirks. He understood that although he had a very powerful ability, there were still more people who could take him down. That Nomu was giving him a good beating back there after all. And then you saw what happened to Suyu and Mineta. If he never trained in order to become stronger, he wasn't even sure if he could even hold a candle to that Nomu. The only reason why he was able to survive for so long was thanks to his shield as well. But now Izuku was questioning, where does he go from here? Where does he go now? That's the thing that Izuku would be questioning. And that's going to be for the next part, guys. This has already gotten too long. Anyways, I already got everything I have to say. You guys, if you've been rocking my content for a little while, just hit that like button. Especially, well, if you like the video, maybe hit that like button. If you've been rocking my content for a little while, well, why not subscribe? Leave a comment. Maybe even share the video to some others who may enjoy this sort of content as well. And yeah, that's pretty much all I got to say for right now, Titan Clan. It is your boy KingTItanX signing out. Peace.